This is Jason Anderson, the Town Council Chairman. It is currently 7:01 p.m. on Tuesday, July 11th, and we are calling this regular Town Council meeting to order. Mr. Wood, if you could lead us in prayer, please.
Heavenly Father, again, we are just grateful that you bring us together with various talents and gifts and mindsets, but yet you call us all to serve here. We just pray that you would give us a united mind and heart to do what is best for the citizens that have put their trust in us to do for them what is right for this town. We pray all this in your precious name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For roll call purposes, all council members are in attendance. Mr. Whitehead has joined us remotely. At this time, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 5, adoption of minutes of previous meetings. Can I get a motion to adopt 5A, special town council meeting June 6, 2023, 5B, regular town council meeting June 13, 2023, and 5C, special town council meeting June 27, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Wakefield. Discussion, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. At this point, we'll move on to next item on the agenda. Item 6, presentations, proclamations, and declarations. Presentation of fiscal year 2021 to 2022 municipal audit report by Mahoney and Sable Company, LLP. Welcome.
Testing. Good. All right. Well, good evening. My name is Mike Van Deventer. I'm a partner at Mahoney Sable, ultimately responsible for overseeing the audit work of the town and issuing the reports on behalf of the firm. You should have received all of the reports that were issued in connection with the town's fiscal year 22 audits. I will not be going through those in detail. I do have a presentation that will really provide an executive summary of the results of that audit. And so I will go through that now, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those as we go along. In terms of the presentation, just wait till I get it up on the screen. Okay. On the first slide, as far as the agenda, I'll cover the scope of work, the audit reports that were issued, provide some overall financial highlights, make our required communications, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go along. In terms of the scope of work, again, no changes in terms of the work that was performed from prior years. We did do an audit of the town's financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition, based on the level of federal and state funding that was received and expended by the town, we did also perform both federal and state single audits. The federal single audit was performed in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Requirements, and the state single audit was performed in accordance with the State Single Audit Act. In addition, we do also perform an agreed-upon procedures engagement for the school district. Those procedures are required by the State of Connecticut Department of Education. In addition to those attest services, we do perform some non-audit services for the town. So we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and the state financial assistance and related notes. In addition, we also assist in converting your governmental fund financial statements to the government-wide financial statements. In order for our firm to be able to perform these services, and remain independent of the town, management is required to oversee these services and ultimately accept responsibility for them. And again, Jennifer Hawkins, as the finance director, has accepted responsibility for those services. In connection with our work, we do issue a number of reports. On the report on the financial statements, we did issue unmodified opinions on the financial statements. An unmodified opinion is expressed when we've concluded that the financial statements have been presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, and that is established by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I do like to point out that our opinion does provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. Again, we do not provide absolute assurance. We're not testing every transaction. There are estimates that are included in your financial statements, and therefore we cannot provide absolute assurance. In addition to the report on the financial statements, we do issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. In this report, we do not actually express an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations or on the effectiveness of your internal controls. Essentially, during the course of performing the audit, if we identify what we consider to be a material noncompliance with the law or regulation or a material weakness in your internal controls, we are required to include it in this report, and we did not report any such matters. In connection with the federal single audit, we issue a report on compliance at the federal award level. In this report, we do actually express an opinion on your compliance with your major federal programs. For fiscal year 2022, the total federal awards that were expended by the town was approximately $4.3 million. The major programs were the Education Stabilization Fund and the Special Education Cluster over at the school district. We did issue unmodified opinions on compliance over those programs. And again, we did not report any deficiencies over grant compliance.
Could you go back to that? Oh, so we're talking 4.3 million expended, and it says 1 million education stabilization, 772.
Right.
But the rest of it, you don't discuss the,
So we only give an opinion on your major programs.
okay?
We follow the uniform guidance in identifying what your major programs are, and they require a specific amount of testing, which for the town was 20% of your overall federal awards. So no, we don't audit all of the grant funding that is received and expended by the school district. It is incorporated into the audit, but we are specifically expressing opinions on these major programs. Yep. We perform and issue a similar report in connection with the state single audit, and that is a report on compliance at the state financial assistance level. For fiscal year 2022, the total state financial assistance expended by the town was $23.6 million. The majority of that is your education cost-sharing funds, which is not subject to the audit. The portion that was not was about $7.3 million. The major programs were the Clean Water Fund grants and loans, the municipal grant and aids, the tiered payment in lieu of taxes, the Alliance District grants, both the capital and operating grants, the vocational agricultural grant, and the Town Aid Road grant. We did issue unmodified opinions on compliance over these programs, and again, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses over grant compliance were reported. Again, the primary thing that we're testing with these grants is that they're being used on allowable activities, and you're charging allowable costs to those grants. Any questions as far as the scope of work or the audit reports that were issued? Okay.
So does that mean, like what you said to Mr. Grandowski, so you only look at 20% of the overall grants?
All of the grants are subject to the financial statement audit. In
Okay.
addition to the financial statement audit, there's specific compliance audits that are required. Those are, we follow a process that has been laid out by the feds and the state of Connecticut in terms of identifying what programs they want us to test.
So those programs have additional testing beyond
Beyond
the
the
standard
financials,
financial
yes.
testing? So
Correct.
everything has its standard financial testing, and then you have to do additional procedures on top of that for those identified programs?
Correct.
Was there anything specific extended on the COVID grants that went to the schools, or no?
Again,
COVID
those
money,
would
or
be
does that
subject,
fall into-
yeah, that would fall into the compliance audits.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
like the Education Stabilization Fund, that included COVID-related money. Yep.
Well, how do you know, or how do you pick, when you pick the 25%? how do you?
There is a whole process that we have to follow.
I think that was what.
Yeah, that's what, that's.
Yeah, there's a risk assessment process that we have to go through, so it depends on, how significant the program is, if it's a new program, how often it's been audited, all those sorts of things are incorporated into that process.
Oh, okay, no, this is beyond what I think we can.
Yep. The important thing is to know that we're following our standards, and we're ultimately, the federal government, OPM, they're looking at our reports, making sure we're testing what we're supposed to be testing. So again, there is a lot of coverage that is
You can't
incorporated
cover it
into
all.
it. We
I mean,
can't
I
cover it all,
understand. Yeah,
right.
that's.
Yeah, yeah. Yep, and so a lot of times we will rotate programs. So we may test a program in one year, and then it will be considered low risk based on the results of that testing, so we won't test it next year, we'll test a different program. Yep. All right. So moving on to the overall financial highlights. Again, a lot of financial information is included in the financial statements. It's well over 100 pages. These really just provide some overall summary of that information. In terms of the general fund budgetary highlights, again, your original and final budget did provide for the use of fund balance in the amount of $1.5 million. Your actual change in fund balance was an increase of $3.1 million. So that did result in an overall favorable budgetary variance of about $4.6 million. Your revenues and other financing sources were approximately $960,000 more than budgeted. You did have a shortfall in interest income that was offset by favorable collections on property taxes, the municipal grant and aid, and tuition revenues. And then overall expenditures and transfers out were about $3.7 million less than budgeted. And again, that was really driven by the education surplus of about $3.4 million. Ultimately, no budgetary compliance issues were identified in connection with our audit work. Next slide goes over your governmental fund financial statements. So this includes your general fund on a modified accrual basis of accounting, as well as all of your special revenue and capital project funds. Overall, the town reported a combined ending fund balance of about $36.4 million. That was an increase of about $3.4 million from the prior year. Again, really driven by the general fund budgetary surplus. Of the $36.4 million, $24.1 million is in your general fund. That was an increase of about $2.9 million from the prior year. Of the $24.1 million, $15.5 million was considered unassigned. That's sufficient to cover almost 3 months and represented approximately 24.5% of your fiscal year 2022 final general fund budgetary expenditure appropriations. Again, the guidance from the GFOA is to maintain at least 2 months of reserves, so you are above that 2-month minimum requirement. In terms of the capital improvement fund, that fund is still reporting a deficit of about $1 million, which was a decrease in the overall deficit of about $1.2 million from the prior year. Again, significant transactions in there includes the closeout of the state-funded upgrades to the water pollution control facility. All of your other funds had an ending fund balance of about $13.3 million. That was a decrease of about $740,000 from the prior year. And again, there are detailed financial statements for each of your special revenue and capital project funds. The town does maintain an internal service fund to cover the self-insured health insurance costs. Your unrestricted net position was about $2.6 million. That was a decrease of about $673,000 from the prior year. That net position is sufficient to cover about 4.5 months of your claims expense. Again, typically we see this number in between 3 and 6 months. So again, you're within that reserve range. In terms of your government-wide financial statements, so this includes all of your governmental funds converted to a full accrual basis of accounting, similar to what you would see for a corporation. So it tries to capture all of your capital assets and all of the related debt associated with those assets, as well as your long-term liabilities related to pensions. The focus on the government-wide financial statements is really on your long-term liabilities. The town is reporting an overall positive unrestricted net position of about $30.7 million, and that was an increase of about $4.9 million from the prior year. In terms of your net pension and OPEB liabilities, the town's net pension liability was approximately $107,000. That's considered to be about 98.5% funded using a discount rate of about 6.3%. So again, that was a decrease from the prior year where you were about 125% funded. This reflects really the market losses that occurred during fiscal year 2022. In addition, you also reduced your discount rate by about 0.25%, which also has an impact on your liability.
And just for everyone here, you know, Jen and I clearly watch that on a regular basis. We've already seen market correction on that. So when we close out for 23, we expect to see that we'll be back in a pension asset position with the closeout without having to make any additional contribution.
Right. So the thing I usually point out for the pension plans is you're going to see variability from year to year depending on the market. The important thing is to look at your assumptions and make sure that they're appropriate. So again, the fact that you, again, have adjusted your discount rate down, that increases your annual required contribution. That will result in a better funded plan over time. So again, the town plan is very well funded. In terms of a net OPEB liability, so the town does recognize a liability associated with post-retirement healthcare benefits. The primary driver of that is the benefits that are provided to retired teachers at the Board of Education. Although the premiums are paid 100% either by the state plan or the retiree, there is still a benefit that is captured and is recognized as a liability in your financial statements. So that liability was approximately $5.7 million. That fund or that trust is about 13% funded using a discount rate of about 3.5%. Again, the OPEB trust fund was established in fiscal year 2016, and so your funded status reflects the fact that that was not established very long ago. This last section goes over our required communications. The first item here talks about our responsibility under our auditing standards. Again, although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, they are the responsibility of management. Everything included in the financial statements did come from the town. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to perform our audit procedures and express our opinions on those financial statements. In terms of the plan scope and timing the audit, again, no changes in the overall scope of work that was originally agreed upon. In terms of the timing of the audit, so there were delays initially in scheduling the audit. We had initially planned to start the audit on extension due to just capacity issues at the firm. There were some additional delays in the completion of certain reconciliations that resulted in some additional extensions being filed this year from the Office of Policy and Management. And then just as information to the council members, there's definitely a capacity issue for audit services for governments in the state of Connecticut. So there's 169 municipalities in the state of Connecticut. Only 30% of them actually filed by December 31st. That number went up to about 70% at the end of March 31st. And then as of today, I think there's still 20 municipalities that still have not filed. So again, there's even if there was more auditors, there's still going to be a number of audits just on extension just because of capacity issues.
But is there a delay also on, I mean, your capacity to do the audits is one thing, but our capacity to get the information to you is another issue.
Correct. Yeah.
So, do we come in and when is the, oh, bear with me, so when is the, so does the town come into you in December, we're not gonna be ready for an audit, we're not gonna be, do they kinda give you an idea, we're gonna be ready March, and we might be ready April? How does that, when do these entities come to you to get their place in line? How?
Right. So we schedule our schedule for the next year is already kind of scheduled out in terms of when the audit's going to start. Again, once we start the audit, there may be some additional delays if we're waiting on some information, from the client. you know, and at the same time, we may have other issues with other clients that get pushed off. So it's kind of a continuous thing that we kind of have to revisit as we're performing the work.
Well, what happened, like this year, we're way later than we, I think this is the latest I've ever seen it. You know, so just.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and we'll talk about, we do have some, you know, recommendations, again, similar recommendations that we had related to last year in terms of timeliness of reconciliations, and ultimately audit prep and being prepared for the audit. In terms of significant audit findings, one of the items that we usually will cover is new auditing standards or new accounting standards. The town was required to implement a statement on leases. The impact of that statement was determined to be immaterial to your town's financial statements. However, again, future leases will need to be analyzed to determine the appropriate accounting in accordance with that statement. The financial statements do include a number of significant estimates and judgments. Those primarily impact your government-wide financial statements. So again, they're not impacting your general fund budget. Those consist of estimated useful lives assigned to your capital assets and discount rates that are utilized to determine your net pension and OPEB liabilities. Again, we did review those estimates and we did deem them to be reasonable and consistent with what other municipalities are utilizing. Other than, again, some of the delays in receiving certain reconciliations to perform our audit work, there were no significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Ultimately, everything we requested was provided to us. There were no uncorrected misstatements. Any adjustments that were identified and proposed are recorded and reflected in the financial statements. There were no disagreements with management. We did obtain a management representation letter. Again, there was no unusual representations that we requested from management. And I just give the example, if we were unable to substantiate a transaction that we selected for testing and we were relying on the representation of management, we would inform you of that representation. And we're not aware of any other consultations by management with other independent accountants. And again, in terms of recommendations, both of these items are really carried forward from the prior year. The first one is the timeliness on financial reporting. So during the audit, we noted that there were year-end account reconciliations at the town and the school district that had not been performed on a timely basis. Ultimately, that did result in some delays in the audit. Again, we continue to recommend the development of formal closing timelines to ensure that all information needed to prepare the financial statements is prepared timely, including all year-end account reconciliations, and that it can be monitored by management. The second item relates to the capital improvement fund deficit. As I mentioned, that fund still has a deficit in the overall fund balance. Part of that deficit was an accumulation from prior years due to shortfalls in fundings that was received on authorized capital projects. Again, that deficit is approximately $1 million. So again, we continue to recommend that the town develop a plan for funding any of those identified deficits on the older projects.
Do you have a list of what those particular projects are, or, I mean, so we underfunded?
So we have them identified, it's cash flow. So we have them identified. No capital projects were overexpended from their authorization. It's whether or not we received the cash from them. So whether or not the grant was received or whether or not we bonded for the funding on that project. So we're working with our bond counsel on identifying those projects as to whether or not we can still have authorization to close out the bonding on them, or what the options are around some of those. So we do have them identified, and we're working through what that plan might be to close out those projects.
What if,
So this isn't about an expenditure component, this is about a revenue component.
okay, so we were promised revenue and we didn't get it, and that's what we're trying to reconcile.
Exactly. So whether whether the grant wasn't, and I'll use an example. Office of School Construction. One of these projects is an old school project, right? Office of School Construction may have deemed something ineligible It's a matter of whether or not we folded that component into the final bonding that we had for authorization of that project. So we didn't get the money through Office of School Construction grant, but we still have the authority to get it under bonding, right? And so it's a matter of cleaning that component up on how the revenue comes in. So it's a cash component, not necessarily, it's not about an expenditure component.
But we're not exceeding the overall
Correct.
expenditure.
Correct. It's
That's-
about getting the identified revenue in.
Okay.
Make sense?
And for your capital funds, you'll see in the financial statement, there are detailed schedules that track the authorization and the cumulative expenditures on those projects. All right, and with that, that concludes my communications and the presentation. So again, happy to answer any additional questions that you may have.
So the majority of the delays on the information that was supplied by the town and the Board of Ed, did that come from Board of Ed side, town side?
I would say it was really on both sides. Ultimately, by the time we started the audit, part of that was I think there was reconciliation issues between the Board of Ed and the town. And so it was just, let's not give them the information until we're ready to go. So again, that makes our audit process a little bit more efficient, but it delays the overall audit timeline.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Wood?
More so a comment there. I think that with the budget that's been passed there, that the Board of Education was that was one of the things looking to add an additional person to help out Ms. Clark, who has, God bless her, been by herself this entire time. So hopefully that'll help with next year's audit and getting some timeliness as well with that. And it's one of those things that has been identified, and we're hoping that will fix some of the problems so that we can hopefully be in the 20% by December 31st.
Now, you talked about a formal closing timeline. Who would, do you get together with management, and how does that?
So this would be something independent of the audit, really. So internally, the audit firm, the auditors should not be part of your internal control structure, right? So you should have your own policies and procedures, your own timeline, if you will, to close out within a certain period of time. And then we just come in and do our procedures and express our opinions. So that's really an internal
Right.
document.
So if I can, so Jen is developing a timeline with the Board of Education. So the Board of Education has to have a certain number of state reports filed by the end of August to the state. So she's working with the Board of Education's finance staff to meet with them in September. With Jen's background, having been in auditing, she kind of has and we already get a checklist from the auditors of what they're going to need. So they're going to start going through the checklist of what we need to get so we can begin that reconciliation process sooner in order to be able to build that audit file. And so she's starting that process of developing that year-end audit file closeout process with the Board of Ed Finance Department. And I know that the Board of Ed is, they're working on trying to get that second individual for assistance for Christine, so that would hopefully assist her in giving that additional person for reconciliation purposes. So Jen is developing that schedule with the Board of Education, because that really has to be done collectively. We can't do that in a vacuum and just hand them a schedule and say, here, this is what you have to perform, right? That doesn't work. So we have to do it collectively, understanding what their demands are on their deadline schedules that they have to meet, and hopefully being able to pull that information together at the same time. So Jen's already pulling together that timeline with Christine.
But we need that statement from you to force the issue. That's maybe what I'm getting at. That if you're bringing it forward, we're gonna take the bull by the horns.
Correct.
And so I like that.
Any further questions? Mr. Whitehead, do you have any questions?
I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, I want to thank you for the presentation, and thank you for all the work you put in on the audit.
Great. Thank you very much.
At this time, we're going to move on the agenda. Next item up is unfinished business for town meeting action. I apologize, I did not clarify earlier. We did not have the public hearing at 7 p.m. Due to the advertisements not being posted as needed.
Correct. I did not get one of the advertisements in. So the request is that the town council consider adding an item to your agenda to postpone both the public hearing and the special town meeting on this item to August, your August 8th agenda.
I will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Discussion? And what was the dates and times, date and time on that? Times?
So
August
I just want to
8th.
clarify what your motion
Okay.
is.
Motion
Your
is
motion
to
is to add this to your agenda.
add an item to the agenda to reschedule
public
the
hearing.
public hearing and the special town meeting to August 8th
The
at
public hearing is at 7
7
PM.
p.m.
Special
and the
town
special
meeting is
town
at
meeting at 8
8
p.m.
PM.
So the motion was,
Where would that be added?
And-
we will add that in as 7B.
Mhm.
So we have a motion was made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion?
Just want to make sure this is just the motion to add this. to the
This is
agenda.
just the motion
Correct.
to add it. In order to add it, I believe we need 2/3 majority to
Correct.
add an item to the agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. So at this time, we're moving on in the agenda to item 7B.
No, 7A
Or
is.
se-
ta-
7A was consideration and action. Seeing how that we cannot,
You're going to look to table that item.
yep. I will entertain a motion to table 7A.
I'll make the motion to table item 7A.
I'll second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. George. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 7A has been tabled. We'll now move on to 7B. As we stated, this item, at this point, I'll entertain a motion to set the date and time for a public hearing and special town meeting on an ordinance to authorize the purchase of sale, authorize a purchase and sale agreement to sell town property at 125 Alexander Parkway to NE Edge LLC. The public hearing would be August 8th at 7 p.m. The special town meeting would be August 8th at 8 p.m. here at the, in the town meeting room at the town hall.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. George. Discussion?
I would like to see the public hearing and the vote at separate meetings. Given what I heard in the last week in comments, we put together a host agreement for this project, and no one was aware of it. And it just happens that it's delayed right now because of, you know, a snafu, which is okay. But there was, as far as if we were getting into a host agreement, there should have been some notification. Maybe we should have discussed the sale of the property and then looked at the host agreement. But all this is behind the scenes. And it was interesting comments A lot of the people that talk to me, they won't come up here. That's okay, that's fine, because it's a difficult thing to do. But I was getting all kinds of comments as, why didn't we go out for bid? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And I think if you put the public hearing and you put the actual town meeting vote at two separate dates, that gives people a chance to think about what was going on. I think I'd like to have made this statement a couple of years ago. I was thinking about it and I never did. But I think I would like to see it as a general policy of the town council, that you have a public hearing and then you have the vote on that particular issue, depending on, I mean, this is a huge project. Major effects on town financing. And that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Ms. Colorio, can you comment, can we hold the public hearing and special town meeting on different dates? Or are we required to have them the same evening?
The town charter just speaks to needing to hold a public hearing and a town meeting vote on the sale of property. It doesn't speak to holding them on the same evening.
Okay.
So I believe that they could be held on separate evenings, but it is a public hearing and town meeting. Traditionally, for sale of property, it is always held
always
public
been
hearing and special town meeting happening concurrently on the same night. We've not held them on separate evenings.
Yeah.
So the public has been accustomed to the public hearing is held on the same night that the special town meeting is being held.
Jason.
I just had one other thing. The other thing, as far as putting this out for bid, due to the fact that this project would be located on multiple properties, not just the town, could the town even put something like that out for bid?
No, we really couldn't, because we don't control the other two properties. And our property would not be advantageous individually on its own. This is only advantageous with the other two parcels.
Okay.
So we don't have control over the other two parcels.
Okay, all right.
The other thing too is, all the documents related to this are on the town website. You
They
just
have,
to
they've been on the website.
Yep,
for-
it's on the front page, click on the data center, you got the host agreement, you got everything's right there.
So may I, was anything done differently with this particular property sale than any other we've done in the past?
No,
Okay, so it's just been standard procedure the way
Correct.
it's been done? Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely the same. And exactly the same as when we sold it the previous time.
Mr. Wayhead?
Barry, there hasn't been any interest at all in that property, correct?
Correct, so
It
the,
would be irrelevant.
yeah, correct. So the town has owned this parcel of land for close to 30 years now, a little over 30 years now. This parcel is the last parcel in our industrial park. It is impacted by several different utility easements and conservation areas. So while it is 39 acres, it's not 39 buildable acres. There's a number of areas or spaces in which are non-buildable. And that does hamper the development possibilities of that property. And again, I think this development opportunity is being presented to the town because of the availability of the two parcels that are right adjacent to that, making the three parcels a more advantageous development for this. But no, we have not. We did go through the sale of this parcel once before. About 4 years ago, we sold this parcel for $70,000. That sale fell through. The buyer backed out due to environmental concerns on the property. We've since done a phase 1 and a phase 2 on that property. We're in the process of doing the final remediation on it. On the environmental that was determined on that property is old car frames, just the frames, just the metal frames that are buried in the ground in about a acre and a half, 2 acre location area of the property. So we've stumped it. We'll be doing that removal over the winter time. Because it's just the metal, we have the ability to remove that. But we haven't had a lot of interest in that parcel over the 30 years that we've owned it.
One more follow-up. So by any East interest, this is actually, this piece of land is a lost revenue, so this is definitely a positive thing for us, for the town.
Yes, and with, I understand, I've had some that have called concerned about tying up the property for no compensation to the town for a protracted period of time, and we recognize that we wouldn't want to have the town's property tied up with no compensation to the town, and that's why the purchase and sale agreement is written that by year 2, the town is receiving $50,000 non-refundable, a portion of that deposit paid annually to the town until they either terminate the agreement or purchase the property completely. So the town is actually receiving the compensation, and it incentivizes the developer to make the decision. No developer is going to want to spend $50,000 that they can't recoup if they don't have the financial backing to do it, or if the development doesn't look like it's going to proceed and move forward. So it does act as that incentive to not just sit on the property for no development purpose whatsoever. And it moves it into that positive position of getting onto tax rolls, because right now it's not currently on the grand list on tax rolls.
Thank you.
As far as the individuals that are talking to me, they're looking at, this would be a benefit to the town. This could be a huge amount of money. But they would like to see to have the person that has purchased, the potential purchaser, to have more skin in the game at the beginning. And then the lawsuits. All of a sudden, we passed these agreements a month ago, and now the lawsuits are, so hence that the purchaser should have more skin in the game. We should put the when they sign the agreement, let's start the 50 grand from day one. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but that's.
So when they sign the purchase and sale agreement, the buyer has to submit $100,000 to an escrow. So they do have to pay $100,000 out of the gate to an escrow. They do have the ability to recoup that $100,000 through that first 2-year time. So that at the time of signing, they have to put $100,000 in. At the 1-year anniversary, they have to put another $100,000 in, bringing that balance in the escrow account up to $200,000. On year 2 of the anniversary of the signing of the escrow of the purchase and sale agreement, they deposit another $50,000. That brings the escrow amount up to $250,000. Simultaneously on year 2 is when they start paying the town out of that escrow amount the $50,000 non-refundable. So they do out of the gate put money out on this agreement. It doesn't come directly to the town, it goes into an escrow, but they do put money out of the gate on this. I understand it's $100,000, but that's out of the gate on the agreement. So that is, the $250,000 is 5% of the purchase price. That's not an unreasonable percentage for a real estate transaction on a deposit. You think of your real estate transactions when you're looking at what you're putting down for a deposit. You don't typically look at putting more than a 5% deposit when you're just holding a parcel, not closing on it, but when you're just holding a parcel as you're going through a due diligence period, you're not typically putting more than a 5% down on a parcel. So I know that the $5 million looks like a really large number, and it is a large number. but 5% is fairly reasonable within the real estate market to ask for a deposit. And yes, it is spread over that initial 2-year timeframe. Part of that was just giving them an opportunity or recognizing that they also needed to get through their, some of their upfront permitting processes and question marks that they have.
Question I have, when was the last time, if we did have one done, that we had an appraisal done on a property? How long ago was it and what was it appraised at?
4 years ago when we sold the property and it appraised at $70,000.
So,
And
and
I agree. This is.
That's
I
what-
mean,
that's what I-
It's a huge amount of
yeah.
money. No, that's where,
But
it's just looking at giving the lawsuits that are coming to play. They want to make sure the purchaser has.
There's
seen it.
one lawsuit.
Well,
There's
I-
not multiple lawsuits.
I'm-
There's one lawsuit, and yes, Any Edge is named in that lawsuit, along with about 50 other defendants, including all of the state of Massachusetts, the city of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts court system, the Boston police, the mayor of Boston, 3 other Connecticut towns, as well as a litany of other people. So it's not just, and I say that I'm not defending Any Edge, all right? I want to be clear, I'm not defending them, all right? And I'm not saying that I don't know what the court is going to rule on that, right? The court is going to make whatever decision the court may have on that, whatever the legitimacy or not legitimacy on that claim, right? That is for the court's decision to have. But I think that a lot of people's interpretation around hearing that there's a lawsuit is that people think that only Any Edge is being sued. And that is false. They are but one defendant out of about 30 defendants. And the defendant list is long, and it incorporates a number of, states and systems that are very large. So, I've read through the lawsuit. It's reading, it's very interesting reading. So again, I think as with every lawsuit, when something initially gets filed, that's an initial blush. There's been no, counter files, no responses on that yet filed. That has a court process to play out on. It doesn't necessarily negate the ability for any of those entities to proceed with developmental processes.
Ed, have you read the lawsuit?
I don't have that much time. I mean, it's-
What I will say,
it-
just
it-
my assumption, reading the lawsuit, it sounds to me like it was a partnership that went belly up, and one's doing really well, and one partner's not, and there's sour grapes. That's what it
Well,
sounds like. That's why after reading it, I have no concern.
But I mean, you look at all the documentation that we have that,
Yeah.
to go through that, I'm just, whatever
Well,
I
that's
see,
why
I
I
gotta
read
pass
it. In
that
fact,
along.
I brought my concerns to Mary. As soon as we had our first meeting, I went and did my research on that company. I always do. And I went right to Mary, and then I looked into it further. And that's what it sounds like, a partnership that didn't go well, and one's really upset that one's doing well and one's not. And it sounds like sour grapes. So with that being said, after looking into it and doing my due diligence as part of this body, I have no issues with that, and whoever is questioning that, I suggest they go read the lawsuit.
Well, I've got it from, a few, so it's like,
what I'm saying.
I can't just let it go. I've got to.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm glad you brought it up, but I would suggest Mary can give you the info, have them read the lawsuit, and they'll it's not. anything to worry
And then the other thing is, okay, if they put the $100,000, the $50,000, then year 2, we start getting a non-refundable. What is so there's only, what happens in year 3? Do they put more, we start collecting off of that 250,000?
Correct, the 50,000, we draw the 50,000 out of the escrow amount. Every year, 50,000 comes to the town. That becomes non-refundable, so they start losing the money that they've put in, which, as a developer, they need to make those decisions as to whether or not they are gonna lose that money. they're gonna,
So
it's
that's
gonna
not
incentivize
funded
them.
when the final, when they make the final $5 million?
Right, so when they purchase, it counts, anything,
Goes to that,
right,
okay.
anything, if they decide to purchase, then all of any of the deposit money, whether it became non-refundable or not, all of that $250,000 gets applied against the purchase price. But if in year 4, they decide to pull out, well, the town keeps $100,000.
Which is more than what the property is
Oh,
worth, so.
More than we've ever gotten for the property. By year 2, more than
And
we've
we
ever
still
gotten
own
for
it.
the property.
But, again, that's where a lot of people, or a number of individuals are looking at, how long can an entity hold us hanging for this? That's what I say, the money is so huge. There's so much at stake all the way around. So where do you go? How do you put pressure on somebody and even the due diligence timeframe? Reading this could go on for 10 years.
Well, if
know-
it goes on for 7 years, we've made $250,000 on a piece of property that we would have only gotten
But then
$70,000
what
for.
happens then if he's still not, then maybe there should be a expiration clause to this document.
And
Because
so,
there is something in here, they're talking about a building permit, and then appeal of a building permit, there's so much mumbo jumbo in there that maybe it's like, okay,
so you're right, there is, the due diligence period is hinged on the issuance of the building permit or an appeal of the building permit. The incentive is, incentivizing them to move forward is, with a development, in my experience, has been not giving them an expiration timeline, because there's always usually an extension period somewhere outlined in there, because they need to be able to finance this deal. And if they're not, that's a challenge in financing it, is if your deal expires at a certain time period, that's a challenge, right? So instead of that, what we look at trying to do is, with developing, it's financial that is the incentive. So having to physically pay out money that you're not going to get back, that financially incentivizes them to move the project forward, because they can't get it back. They know they're going to pay out $50,000 and they can't get that money back. So they have to be able to move that forward and have the project moving. That's what is going to incentivize them to move forward, more so than saying, well, if you don't have it developed or have a building permit pulled by X period. We ran into this same problem on a smaller scale. So I'll give you another example, smaller scale. 140 Main Street. We issued an RFP and we had very specific timelines for when they had to pull a permit and when they had to have certain deliverable development to occur on 140 Main Street. We got 0 development on it. 0. You know why? Nobody could commit to the schedule. Too many unknowns. That was only on the development of or rehab of a building. This has too many question marks for that. And so to incentivize that development, to make sure that they're going to continue to move forward, that's where they get incentivized by actually having to pay out of pocket. That's where you get them, is by paying out on the pocket, having to actually have to physically cut a check that they can't recoup from. They're not going to get that money back. That incentivizes that moving forward.
The other thing to take into consideration too is when you start talking about deadlines and unforeseen things happen, especially when you consider what happened in spring of 2020 with COVID and the way things came to a grinding halt. Any developer who's in their right mind is definitely going to take something like that into consideration. We may never see it in our lifetime, but who knows, something like that could come up, and what if it does? Where does that leave them at that point if they've got a deadline? And now, oh great, we're going to be out of this money because we got delayed because of this. So, I mean, as far as putting a deadline on, I can understand that being a concern. And as Mary said, with the 140 Main Street, I mean, put an RFP out with a deadline on it, and we got no interest. So,
well, then, at what, so it's year 2 through, what? They have 7
Seven.
years to get this done.
Yeah.
Or do we keep that?
And so they have their first estimation of building permit to be pulled in 2024 for potential initial occupation in 2026. That's what their current Gantt schedule looks like. So that means that they're looking to close on property well before even the 2-year mark.
Yeah.
So, I know that they're already starting their stack to try and make their plans. They're going to be meeting with planning and zoning to start talking through what their steps are on the planning and zoning piece to start bringing forward their package with them. So it's not like they're just sitting here going, let's twiddle our thumbs and wait until this town does whatever they're going to do and then, wait 6 months and do the next step. They're proactive in, how can we move this project forward? So I know that we won't see it until shovels meet the ground, but
Well, then they still have to go through the Connecticut Economic Development. That's another layer that before.
they have to get this done
Oh,
first.
no, I
If we
know.
can't get this
Oh, no,
done,
but
they
I'm
can't
saying-
get there.
Yeah.
But to get to that building permit date, that's.
But again, they got to get there,
Oh, no,
here first.
so- And then sometimes
Hey,
I think,
Mary,
Yes, Andy?
Mary, what is the estimated taxes on that piece of property, being that it's really significantly, not significantly, but really it's value of $70,000? So what, if I own that property right now, what would I be paying in tax?
Hang on a
Just
second.
A round number off the top of your head.
Round number off the top of my head. Yeah. About $1,300.
Okay, so our liability for 2 years is $2,600. And our positive is after the 2 years go, we get 50 grand. To me, that's a winning bet. And they're not gonna pursue, like you said, they're not gonna pursue this if it's not gonna be advantageous for them, and they'll know within the first 2 years what's going on. So you lose $2,600, not a big deal. My opinion, sorry.
That we haven't been collecting for 30 years.
100%.
that's where the problem with this, it's a nightmare because the dollars are what's out there and where do you bend or the pressure that I'm getting, okay, I've gotta throw it out there.
So can I, go ahead, Ray. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Jason, you say that, not me.
So, back to your original comments, I can definitely appreciate what you're saying about the public hearing and the special town council meeting being on the same nights there, but it seems like the precedent has been set here for the town. Doesn't mean that we can't change, of course, but I think with this, I think we should continue that precedent, especially since now people will have a month to really look at it because of a mistake. It was one little mistake. Apparently, we have to have 2, not 1, postings in the paper for this. Overall, obviously, when in regards to the lawsuit, none of us are legal experts, and as far as I know, none of us have stake in the game with that one. So that is on them, 100%. But I think ultimately the question that right now is on the table is about setting the date. So I'd like to move that question.
Okay. All right. So we'll move the question. And this was to set the date for the public hearing for August 8th at 7 p.m., the special town meeting at August 8th at 8 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Motion carries. At this point, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is item 8, citizen statements and petitions. Ms. Calorio, what did we have submitted?
We didn't have any submitted written.
Thank you. At this time, anyone who would like to make any public comment, please step up to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Donna Bronwell, 699 Bailey Hill Road up in East Killingley. I've been chair of conservation for, I don't know, over 20 years. Just thought I'd come by and let you know what's going on. Haven't been here in a number of months, so it's always good to create a presence. We did have, Killingley Conservation did have 4 events in, from April, in the spring. Last Green Valley put out a request for events for their spring, I forget what they call it now, but anyhow, spring outdoors for public events. And we did do 4. One of them was a walk on Mason Hill, and that's a very small property under an acre that the town got through the federal government when they took that property from the owner because there was a marijuana sale. Then that was back, he was growing back in, I don't know, 20 years ago and more now. But anyhow, that's how we got the property, and it's way the heck up in the boonies on Mason Hill Road. And there is a trail there, and also the Vocational Agricultural Group has some interest in that too. They're part of the stewards for their property. But we did hold a walk, and that was great. We did another walk at Cat Hollow again, always well received. If you haven't been down to Cat Hollow, you should go. I mean, there's the paved section that's about a half a mile long, I guess. And then there's also, now we can go down over across the bridge. That finally we got the bridge after many, many years. And over there are trails on the opposite side of the pond too. So that was great. A couple weeks ago we did a walk up at Old Furnace and up in Ross's Cliffs, and started out at Old Furnace. If you haven't been up there, you should go. It's about 2 miles up to the top of Ross's Cliffs, where you got this wonderful view of Rhode Island and the whole area. And then you go down to the parking lot. And then folks could choose whether to take a bus back, because that's a 2-mile trek. So we did engage a bus through the school board. They let us use the bus, and we pay for the driver, which is a good deal. And their drivers love to go on our trips. Anyway, and so most people did walk back down around the lower pond, that other additional 2 miles. So it was about a 4-mile walk. Some of us did take the bus back. We also did one bus tour. I've developed those bus tours over the past number of years now, I forget, 6, 8 years, I guess. So every once in a while I pull one bus tour out, and we, again, use the school bus and pay the driver out of our conservation funding that we have through our budget. So that was great. We love having people come, and my goal is to get people outside and appreciate what we have in our town. Just as a side, we have 2 alternative openings on our commission. Thankfully, we've got some good people now that are taking responsibility and action with a number of projects, so I'm really grateful about that. I don't have to do it all. But we do have 2 alternate openings. There's 7 positions, 5 regulars, which we now have filled, and 2 additional alternative positions that are open. And of course, we always invite everybody to come to our meetings. We love having extra people. And our next meeting is next Wednesday, whatever that next Wednesday is, at 7 o'clock down in the room 102. So that's my story. Just thought I'd update you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Alfred Dufresne, 148 Pond Road, East Killingley. And I'm here in regards to the status of the ponds in East Killingley. They're beautiful ponds and great for our town. And I know Rights Investors was trying to give away the flowage rights and the dam and the dams to the town or the state of Connecticut. And the last meeting was in regards to that was in 2020. And I believe that the town was going to try to pursue and help rights investors find out if the state of Connecticut wanted to acquire the properties, as rights investors doesn't want to continue to own the properties. They don't think it's in their interests, their business interests, as they're into financial and Wall Street. And I know that some of the problems of taking over the properties is the dams, the maintenance of the dams. And I'm just here to bring public awareness to it and try to keep the issue in the limelight instead of being forgotten about. And then in the future, something happens, where the dams need to be breached or repaired, and then it's going to be a big issue then, rather than to continue to be proactive rather than reactive. And the pond I live on is Old Killingly Pond on Pond Road, and the state of Connecticut has about 150 acres of, it's the Killingly Pond State Park, and the state of Connecticut actually owns that park, which is being used by a lot of people right now. They kayak, they fish, and they actually have cookouts there. And it's undeveloped. A lot of the money goes to the other state parks like Nashmucket and elsewhere, but no money is actually going to that state park. I was wondering, if maybe they would have interest in maybe helping to maintain the dam there, But it's pretty important resource, these dams, water resource and environmental and the wildlife, and the water also is it goes into an aquifer recharge area for the town of Killingly. It's waterhead protection area for the Hopkins well, and the water goes down Whetstone Brook. Ours is the headwaters to the Whetstone Brook. It's a spring-fed pond, the Old Killingly Pond, and so I don't know. I was just trying to bring the issue into the limelight and to keep it going, and find out what the next step would be to continue to try to preserve these beautiful areas of our town, because it's a really important part of our town, these beautiful ponds we have. Old Killingly Pond, Middle Reservoir, Alvia Chase Pond, Bog Meadow Reservoir, and then there's Acme Pond. And that's why I'm here tonight, just to keep it in the limelight and keep it public interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing no more public comment, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is council and staff comments. Ms. Gloria, can you speak to, I know it was brought up as far as the town originally was going to assist Wish on seeing if the state would acquire those properties. What steps were taken, and where, if anywhere, did that go?
So it's been a while since I've had the conversation with Wish on that, with Right Investment. They had expressed interest in, having some communication with the state of Connecticut. I did let them know that we could, support them in those conversations. They had reached out and had a brief conversation and reported back to me that the state really wasn't really showing any, they weren't showing any interest. I can reach back out to Right Investment and, see if they want to re-pick up that conversation. They haven't expressed any, ongoing conversations with the state, but I can reach back out to them. Again, it's been a while since I've had a conversation with them on that.
Okay. If you could, that would be great. Thank you.
Is there any way we could enlist the help of the state representatives and our senator to maybe talk to the state officials that would be working with Wish on that? Maybe they can put their input?
We could. I
Their
want to, let me first circle back with Wright Investments and find out exactly who, they might be currently talking with, or if they're currently talking with anyone, or when their last conversation was with whoever. I think they were trying to coordinate with someone from Deep, and there's been a lot of change over at Deep in at least the last 6 months. So the person that they were working with may not be there anymore, and we may need to assist them with finding a new contact person. So let me reach out to them and just see where they are with all of that. I know we've been really focused on the ED Prey and trying to work through with them the impacts and managing that situation. And they really haven't had any conversation with me with regards to the overall holdings of those.
Thank you.
So with regard to Edie Prey, so the road is open now, we have issues with beavers, but the road is open.
It's in my manager's report.
Well, no,
Yes.
well, I want to get it out.
Yeah, so the ED Prey, they did request, so there was a failure in that dam. The water had drained to a certain level, and they were seeking approval from Deep to formally breach it and basically create a spillway right there. It doesn't alleviate or eliminate the Edie Prey pond that's there, reservoir. It does lower the water level. However, beavers plugged up that breach, but it was unstable. So they contacted Deep to see if they could widen that failure area to be able to prevent the beavers from just clogging it up overnight or over a shortened period of time, and allow them to just maintain the water level until they get through that process with Deep and the engineering process around formally breaching that portion of the dam. Deep did approve that, and they did do that excavation to widen that failure area to be able to allow, so the beavers wouldn't be able to just, reblock it up overnight or over a 2-day time period. That being said, the beavers are still very active in trying to block that area up, but the beavers are getting some help. So, whether it's, individuals or children that, they pulled some large rocks out of that dam area in order to be able to open that space up. Some individuals have rolled the rocks back into the spillway area, and so it's creating a blockage, right? So I get it, rocks make a big splash, and big rocks make bigger splashes. So they've had to go out there and re-pull those out. So, the ask obviously is to make sure that, if you see rocks out, don't roll them back in. They're out for a reason. We don't want them rolled back in. The beavers do enough in trying to block that up. But so they're working through that, but they are still in direct communication with Deep around the formalization of the formal breaching of that, which will create it into a spillway that will protect the roadway. So we won't have to, have the concern of a flooding or an overtopping of the roadway. It still does, the water level. There is still a pond area or a reservoir area for the Edie Prey. It is a lower area, though. It is a lower watered area.
And then a couple of years ago, they had had somebody go in and look at the Acme Pond Dam. They did some repairs, but
They did.
Our road, Bailey Hill Road, goes over that, and
Yes.
nobody wants to touch the valves or anything else. So.
Yeah, so there's actually a box culvert that goes underneath the road right there on Bailey Hill. That's flip a coin. Is it the dam side? Is it the dam side owner? Is it the mill side owner who actually owns that structure? But the structure does have some deterioration. That eventually we're going to have to address that, because eventually we have to redo the road, and you have to be cautious about what type of equipment you can put over that culvert area. So that is impactful. But yes, they did do, they had to do an entire compliance program with DEEP on the repairs to the Acme Pond Dam, in resecuring the dam into the toe of the slope for that dam. So they did do that work, and DEEP did sign off on that. I think it's been about almost 4 years now, 3.5 years.
So is there anything with the box culvert, is there any limitation that we should be looking at maybe that?
Not at the moment.
I don't-
As far as limitations are concerned, we don't have any weight limitations on it or anything like that. We haven't had any of that concern, but we monitor it continuously. That road is starting to creep up the list of roads for repair, for reconstruction. That will push that issue. So we're going to be starting to dive down that legal rabbit hole sooner than later to determine who's fixing that. But yes, that is going to need to get addressed.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Wood?
Yeah, if I remember right, a good majority of us were actually on the council back then. Back in 2020, the big reason we didn't want it was because of the liability of the dams. That was the reason the town didn't take it on. But it was good that it's been brought back to our attention there, because obviously that's a conversation to be had again with them, and hopefully get them to be able to talk with the state and fix some of these issues. And I agree. My grandmother, when I was a kid, she lived in East Killingly, so I spent a good time right by Acme Pond and all that. So it is a beautiful area, and I'd love to see a lot of that remain that way. So
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Whitehead?
No, all set, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is appointments to boards and commissions, and we have none. So moving further on, we'll go to item 11A, reports from liaisons. I do not see a Board of Education liaison, and I do not, yep.
The
So-
DOE doesn't meet during the
Doesn't
summer.
meet during the summer as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Given a comment on Board of Ed liaison, and we have the auditors come in, and we don't have a Board of Ed person or whatever, it's kind of disheartening. Thank you.
So we'll move on in the agenda to item 12, discussion and acceptance of monthly budget reports. Can I get a motion to adopt the summary report on general fund appropriations for town government?
So moved.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Wakefield. Discussion?
Why is everything upside down?
Any comments?
All in order.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 12B. Can I get a motion to adopt the system object based on adjusted budget for the Board of Education?
so moved.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made by Mr. Wood, seconded by Mr. Cottula. Discussion, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item up is 13A, correspondence communication reports, town manager's report. Ms. Gloria, if you could.
So the first item that I gave you is law enforcement statistics. So you'll note that third quarter of this fiscal year, we actually took almost the same number of calls for our law enforcement department for the town as Troop D took for the town. So the blue bar and the orange bar are nearly equivalent. So we are taking a lot of the calls within the community, which is great. We like to see our officers really want to be that first point of contact, and they really strive to be that point of contact for our community. They are also strive really hard to be at and attend and be a presence at all of our events and really participate in all of our events in varying levels. So really applaud them for all of that. In 2022, the state of Connecticut passed legislation requiring law enforcement units to be accredited by Post C. And then when that legislation initially passed, they initially told resident state trooper towns that it doesn't apply to you guys because the state of Connecticut is already a CLIA accredited. So they're accredited through a national level accreditation program called a CLIA. And so you resident state trooper towns, because all of your work product and all of your processes have to fall under the state process anyway, you guys all fall under that. You don't have to worry about it. And then they did an about face and said, oh, no, wait a minute. We want you to do the accreditation process anyway, right? So we've been working through, Buddy, our public safety administrator, has been working through uploading all of the information for the accreditation. However, it has been an education experience for Post in their accreditation process because their accreditation system is developed based on a standard municipal police department or the state police department. They don't take into account a hybrid department like ours in that the vast majority of our operating procedures and our facilities are governed by the state, and very few components are actually locally driven. And so they want to check their boxes and they can't check boxes, right? Because it just doesn't apply, and that's a struggle, right? So Buddy has worked really hard on this. A lot of it is uploading the state's operations manual and highlighting specific sections on how they apply to our officers, as well as including our employee manuals and, because we are responsible for the hiring processes, so going through our hiring processes with them. It's a very in-depth process. So we met with, we had our review date. They came out and just sat down with us and went over where we are in this review process. We are currently pending, so, and she did indicate that we are well underway to accreditation. And we've done very well in this process. She's met with a number of other towns that have not come nearly as far as this. So really a great feedback for all of the work that Buddy has put into this. We really think that we can get that wrapped up in the next couple of months and get that accreditation. They automatically, because now they will be visiting us every year. So they've already told us they're coming back out on July 2nd next year. And I'm like, really? July 2nd? So they're coming out July 2nd next year. This really, we're going to start running into, and hopefully, so the state did pass in the current year legislation that delayed the requirement for this accreditation by a year for resident state trooper constable towns, because they understood that what they wrote in legislation didn't implement properly with this type of organization, and so they have to redevelop the accreditation process. So we're hoping that we can be a partner in that, in educating both the reviewers and the accreditation process in how organizations like ours work, so that way we can be effectively reviewed and properly accredited. We want to make sure that that's an effective process and that we're reviewed just like, it's very similar to like being audited. Right? Only it's all based on, instead of financial information, it's all based on our policies, procedures, and how things are enacted. So that's the law enforcement accreditation process. For personnel updates, I'm very pleased to announce that we have successfully hired our Class 4 WPCA superintendent for our wastewater treatment facility. Ben Gilmore will be joining us on August 14th. He is going to be he'll be a great addition to Killingly. He is definitely a hands-on, willing to roll up his sleeves and get in there kind of manager. He spent the whole day down at the plant this past Friday with the staff, just learning about the plant. There's a really great attitude and approach to our system. So really, really excited to have him on our team. So the WPCA did support that completely. And then I started yesterday. Ashley Fell started yesterday as my new executive assistant in my office. And she's working out great. So really excited to have her as part of my team as well. So you're going to start to see emails from Ashley. She's in my office. And she's trying to keep me straight. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I already gave you the update on the Edie Prairie Reservoir Dam. Just to give you an update on, so our community development department, Mary Brom, back in 2019, we had started doing some regional consulting with several towns on providing consulting services for the administration of small cities grants programs. That program requires certain accreditations, if you will, in order for you to administer the program. A lot of towns were seeing that consultants were just fleeing the field completely, and many towns weren't able to administer their programs anymore. So we had at one point in time we had hired a full-time person that was also assisting her with those grants. We no longer have that individual in that office, but just so you know, Stafford has completed their 2019 grant program successfully. We're in the final closeout of that grant, and so that's great. They will periodically get program income back in. So if a property transacts in a certain time frame, the program requires recoupment of that money, and then that money can be reused for another housing rehab project. So they still need to have that qualified consultant. So we may still provide some of that compliance oversight for them, but the grant itself has been fully completed, and all projects have been completed on that. We're still working with Putnam, and Putnam will be closing out theirs in March. Theirs is largely program income at this point in time, so we'll be closing out with them in March, and then we're also doing some consulting with Woodstock. But those are the other towns that we work with for that program. We've been scaling back on that just as she has a lot of other demands with regards to our capital projects and stuff like that. So we need to balance that out appropriately. The Danielson Veterans Coffee House, they invited myself and Elaine Sestair from Putnam to go up and speak to them with regards to exemptions that might be available to veterans. So we spoke about veterans exemptions, but also elderly exemptions and abatements and how they might be able to apply for them and what they might be eligible for. And so that was a great opportunity. We had a lot of fun chit-chatting with them. So it was really nice to be invited up there. They do a really fantastic program. And then lastly, Connecticut Water sent notification to the town that apparently a couple of years ago, they established a customer advisory council, and Killingly can appoint a representative that is a resident and a Connecticut Water customer to serve on that customer advisory council. Those meetings happen every about 3 to 6 months, every 3 to 6 months, and they're via Zoom. So anybody who might be interested in participating that meets those qualifications, you can fill out a board or commission's application form, and we'll add it to our open slots for boards and commissions. But I wanted you to be aware that was a new available opportunity for someone to volunteer. And then I listed the meetings that seem to be a regular occurrence for me.
Now, I do have one question. On Connecticut Water, the Customer Advisory Council, can someone who's serving on a different board or commissions for the town already serve on that because it's for Connecticut Water?
I will have to check on that.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure. I will have to check on that.
Probably could because NDDH was the same way.
I think so.
Okay.
Because I think the Cable Advisory Council is the same way. You can serve on, because it's a separate entity. It's not
Yeah.
a town board. It's a separate
Connecticut Water
board. But I will double check.
Okay.
I don't
Thank
want to
you.
just make a blanket statement on that. Because I think also a council member could serve on that.
I guess maybe this is probably the right time. We had Dave Cat put on an RFP for the Chase Reservoir for the forest management plan,
We did.
and that.
So, yeah, I didn't give an update on that, but, so we did put out an RFP for that. We didn't get any respondents. So we did reach out to the several of the foresters that we were expecting to receive respondents on. They've just been super busy. And they're like, we don't have the time to commit to it, so we didn't want to put in for an RFP. So Dave is trying to time back out another time that we can put the RFP back out again, that we know we'll be able to get responses. And we're really kind of thinking maybe in the fall timeframe, that may be a better time to get it out there, and actually get some responses back. So it's a matter of when are we going to hit a bit of a lull time for them. So we're trying to communicate with some of them to just trying to see, like, when would be a time that, you know, might be a good time to put it out. So we didn't get any responses, and it was really just because all of them are too busy, and they can't commit.
We gotta do something, Chase.
I agree.
I just wanna, because that's a tough.
It is. I agree.
It's not getting any easier over there, so that
It's not.
our costs will be exponentially getting higher, but whatever.
I agree.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just real quick there, I know you didn't put this in your report, but dredging at Owen Bell, has that begun?
No, it has not, because we're still waiting for Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay.
So Army Corps still has it for review. So at this point, we're probably looking at next summer, unfortunately, because as much as we kick Army Corps, sometimes that's an entity that the more you make noise, the farther down in the pile you go. So that squeaky wheel doesn't always make, you know? So, yeah, we're trying to edge that one along, but we may not be able to accomplish that one this year because of Army Corps.
But that won't affect the use of the park. I mean, we still-
Correct. It doesn't, so it does, you know, it will delay the timing in which, you know, clearly there were park impacts that were going to happen because when the dredging occurs, that material is going to be staged and dewatered on the soccer field, which does displace all the activities on the
But
soccer
for
field.
This year, that's.
This year,
when that work actually
right.
happens, that's when we get a disruption. But-
Correct.
So right now.
No
with-
disruption.
With the pond being
Right.
not there, that's not affecting.
Right. And we've had clearly plenty of water this year, so we haven't had to worry about not being able to irrigate.
That's, come on down. I mean, when I was there for the,
Red, white, and
red,
blue.
white, and blue part of that, and there was a good crowd there.
I think it was one of our largest.
And parking issues were major.
You can't plan parking for that many people.
I found a solution. You park elsewhere and you ride your skateboard.
I'm just gonna stay.
No problem. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 14, unfinished business for town council action. We have none, so we'll move on to item 15A, consideration and action on a resolution to accept the town's basic financial statements and related audit reports for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, second by Mr. Wood. Ms. Clorio, if you go over this, please.
I think our auditor went over this, so they reviewed our financial statements. This is the town council accepting those financial statements as presented.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion from council? I do look forward to when we can start getting the audit finalized a little sooner. So I know
Agreed.
we're taking steps forward. Hopefully those make a difference.
Mhm.
Now, Mary, didn't the Board of Ed overhaul or revamp their system for their, putting all their information in for financial? Wasn't there a new program or something?
New
to help them out?
software
Or their new
recently.
software, I
So-
think.
I don't believe that they've
Or were
implemented
they-
new software. I think they were looking at doing
They're
new
looking
software,
at it, so they
but
haven't
they have
started.
not implemented new software, not that I'm aware of.
But would that cause a bump? Like, can we oversee that causing a bump next year?
So if, when
We
they,
have to be
so whenever
cautious on-
financial software is implemented, that slows everything down.
That's what.
And it will.
So we may have to look at
But
another year.
I don't know that they're implementing right now. And
I thought
so
they had looked at what it was gonna cost.
they were
but
looking at it,
haven't
but I
made a
don't think
move
that
on it.
they haven't, I
Okay.
don't know that they've procured, they haven't started implementation yet,
Okay.
so.
'Cause I know that's
think that's a
gonna
little bit
be a
of
bump.
Yeah, that will be a bump. That will be.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is item 15B, consideration and action on a resolution to appoint Mahoney, Sable and Company LLP certified public accountants to perform the town's audit for fiscal year 22-23.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Ms. George. Discussion. Ms. Gloria, if you could go over this.
Sure, so this would be the second year of a 3-year contract extension that we have with Mahoney and Sable. The fee for this year will be $58,000, which was what was presented previously. That hasn't changed. I will say that, you know, they are very thorough in their audit process and procedure. You know, myself having previous municipal audit experience, I know what to look for in an auditor as to whether or not they're actually performing their procedures, as well as Jen is very familiar with what they're supposed to be doing for auditing procedures, and they perform all of them. I think sometimes they're a little tougher on us because they know that our background is in auditing, but it's good. That's what they should do, right? And so we're very pleased with the level of detail that they go through on all of our financials, both at the Board of Education level and at the town level. Even though that we have had Mahoney and Sable now for a number of years at this point in time, they never go, oh, we've always looked at that, and just bypass. They never bypass steps. They are always diligent in getting through all of the detail, asking all of the questions, performing all of the testing. They don't ever shortcut it. So I've always been impressed with their diligence around our audit. So I recommend that they be appointed again for this past year's audit that just ended.
Thank you. Questions, comments from council? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is item 15C, consideration and action on a resolution to authorize the amendment of the memorandum of agreement between the town council and the Board of Education to increase the maximum accumulation of funds for the non-lapsing education fund to $2.5 million. Is there a motion? Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is item 15D, consideration and action on a resolution to introduce and set August 8th, 2023 for a public hearing and special town meeting on an ordinance authorizing a transfer of up to $746,742 to the established unexpended education funds account. Can I get a motion to set this date?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Wakefield. Ms. Gloria, can you just go over this really quick?
So the Board of Education had requested that the town council fund the non-lapsing account up to the cap of the existing MOU, which is $2 million. The value that is here, the $746,742, will is the value to bring it up to that $2 million at the end of the 2022 fiscal year, because that is the year that we're looking at for this.
Thank you. Discussion, questions?
When, now, if any money they use from that non-lapsing account now
Yep.
is not part of,
Correct, it's not part of that, it's not part of that.
because that's to replenish that's to get it back. So
That
now
get-
we start from, so basically, this brings it up to 2 million, so
As of July 1 of 2022. As of July 1 of 2022. And then they have the activity that occurs from July 1 of 2022 through June 30th of 2023, which you will have another request, probably in the fall, for whatever that resulting amount is.
How could, I don't know how to ask the question, I'm trying. Okay, if they spend money between now and October, that's what you,
So they can only spend the value of what is in the account. So they can't spend this, they can only spend what is the value of what is in the account. They can't assume that on July 1st of 2022, it automatically went to $2 million. This $700,000 isn't accounted for in that non-lapsing account at this point in time because it hasn't been approved. It's not there.
So Mary, right now, they can spend up to 1.3?
Yes.
What would be available
That's,
for them?
yeah,
to
except for what they've
spend
already,
down,
right.
Except what they've used to date.
Right, up until, yes.
And this is what they're trying to get back into it.
They're-
So as of the.
So they
October
have to
date, there'll
go-
be 2 million again.
As of
July
July 1 of
22.
July 1 of 2022, that puts the account balance for this back to 2 million.
If we approve.
If this gets
Not
gets
the public
approved
hearing.
by special town meeting,
Right.
because of the value of it, right?
Okay.
So this has to actually go to public hearing and special town meeting in order for it to be approved because of the dollar value of it. So, they then have their expenditures that they had occur throughout the current fiscal, or the 2023 fiscal year, that they will subsequently ask for another request, I'm sure, in the fall for a replenishment of that from their unexpended funds from the 2023 year.
Now, is that where we see the 3.4 million?
The 3.4 million was from the 2022 fiscal year.
Okay.
Yep. So
So it's
they
actually
had
5.4.
So they had $3.4 million unexpended in fiscal year 2022. So June 30th of 2022, they had remaining unexpended education funds of just under 3.5 million. They're requesting of that money to have almost $750,000 put into the non-lapsing. That means that they will return, the remaining surplus that returns to the general fund is 2.7 instead of the 3.4, right? Does that make sense? So, and as far as, is this a supplemental appropriation or that? This is not. This is just a redesignation within our fund balance, so it does not account for supplemental appropriation or anything like that. This is just an accounting feature within our fund balance.
So it does not hit our credit rating.
Correct. Correct.
And the 746,000, that is 2% or less than their budget for
Correct.
that year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Mary, could you just go over, because that could be very confusing for
That's a
anybody
lot of
that's listening.
numbers.
Why 2022 and then in a few months 2023? Can you just
Yeah, so why are we doing this now, right? So the town council takes up this action item once the audit is complete. You have to take the action once you have audited numbers, right? So you were unable to, they made this request actually in June of 2022, right? So a year ago, they made this ask. You weren't able to take action on it back then because you didn't have audited numbers. The audited numbers needed to be finalized so the auditors could confirm what the actual unexpended educational funds were and what the balance of the non-lapsing account was. So that way we could confirm how much could the town consider to put into this account. So because the audit was delayed, that's why we're talking about a fiscal year that's a year that ended over a year ago, right? And so since then, we now have another fiscal year, June 30th of 2023, that has now also ended, right? So I'm sure that ask is going to be coming to you probably in the fall. And typically the town council, because our audit is typically, we're talking about this usually in December or January timeframe. That's typically the normal time that we're talking about this. And hopefully that's when we're going to be talking about again, is January or February timeframe is when we're going to be talking about what your ask is, what their ask is from the 2023 year that just ended, right? So this is really delayed because the audit was delayed.
Yeah, that's why I'm sitting here, I'm like, it makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure anybody listening home is probably just as confused as I am.
It's like, what are we doing? How many years are we crossing? I get it.
And ultimately, we're just setting the date.
Yeah.
So it's critical the audit gets done closer
Earlier.
to January, so we're not doing this
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Then they have access to the money, now they don't, now we're in another, but if they're gonna, yeah, so they lose a
The
whole-
ability to spend
basically
more,
they're
yeah.
losing 8 or 9 months
Yep.
of,
Right.
because they've only used, what, 1.7 million of non-lapsing money and.
Over the years, yeah, they haven't used a
They
whole lot
haven't
of it.
really used that much of it, and it's, you know. So another reason that, but it's the Board of Ed's problem. And then there was I heard a comment that Board of Ed members were blaming the town because we didn't review the audit. Well, hey, guys, you know.
Which goes back to Christine Clark's only one person too, on
no,
their end,
I
you know.
know, but, yeah, so.
Yeah. I'm not blaming her by any
Like you
means.
said, the budget passed to add that assistant to help her out, so hopefully
Collectively, we can get
make
there.
this. And that's what I wanted when he was here, that the formal closing timeline, I wanted to push, let's push it a little bit, you know. I'll catch heat for that, but that's all right.
Now, I do have one question. Considering we already have a public hearing and special town meeting scheduled for August 8th, is this going to be an issue having
Nope,
both?
you can have multiple, all on
Okay.
the same day. We've done
Okay.
it before.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yep. I don't have 3 scheduled for that.
But
That's just a public hearing, though. That's not a special town meeting. That's only a public hearing.
All right, any further discussion? So are we setting a time on this as well, or just
Public
setting the
hearings are
dates?
always at 7
7
p.m.
o'clock.
Yeah, they're always 7
Special town
p.m.
meeting will be at 8. Okay,
Yes.
all right. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 15E. Consideration and action on a resolution authorizing the salary adjustments for non-union employees and management staff for fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Mr. Wood. Ms. Cloyer, could you go over this, please?
So this is the annual request made for the non-union, part-time and full-time employees that are not affiliated with bargaining units. So these are all our non-union folks. It does not include myself. It does not include the town manager that you do as any separate consideration. This is all based, I am performing, I'm in the process of performing performance evaluations of all of the staff. But this is a cost of living increase. Their increases are not tied to performance evaluations. I specifically requested that we don't tie those. I think that ends up detracting from the value of a performance evaluation, and I think our performance evaluation system has been working very well. We have been having really good results from that. This is a 2.5% increase. It's the same increase as last year. This was presented to the Personnel Subcommittee, and they recommended it for approval here to the Town Council tonight. This action would authorize a transfer from the contingency of $65,000 that was budgeted for. We did budget for this within our budget process. This also includes, this is the first year that we actually have WPCA employees that are town employees as well. So this is our first year of the incorporation of that as well. There is no transfer required on within the WPCA accounts. They are sufficiently budgeted for within their personnel budget line items, so there's no transfer outlined within this resolution for the WPCA. That value is a $10,000 impact on the WPCA side, but again, that was all incorporated within their budget that was approved by the WPCA in their process. And again, I think all of our staff work very diligently and strive for being as efficient as possible and being as diligent and recognizing that they are working as public servants of this community. And they really try very hard to focus their day on being able to be performing that. So I respectfully request the 2.5%.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Just a few things that I had brought up during the personnel sub. This was one of my concerns was obviously that we maintain the market standard, and this helps to do that for these folks here. The other part too, as Mary's already said, this is not part of the because of the performance standards there, things like that. Obviously, if people are lacking performance, that's still brought up, and remediation and things like that still
Disciplinary
happens.
process happens.
We're just not punishing them financially, should that be an issue. But I just want folks to know that it doesn't go unnoticed, and if there were an issue, it would be addressed.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on in the agenda. Next item up is 15F, consideration and action on a resolution to introduce and set a date of August 8th, 2023 for a public hearing on an ordinance amending Chapter 7 to implement revisions required by FEMA to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Ms. George. Ms. Gloria, could you go over this, please?
Yes, so FEMA conducted a flood insurance study of it's really a statewide and a region-wide. They're actually doing this across the nation, and they do it periodically. It's for flood insurance. It's adjusting the flood insurance, the flood maps to determine where flood plains are going to be, and thereby who needs to have flood insurance and those that may not need to have flood insurance any longer, and how those hydraulics might work. The town received those flood insurance maps. And with that, we also received revisions to our zoning regulations as well as our ordinance. We have a our flood management ordinance, and so we received the revisions required for that flood ordinance. So the revisions that you have before you was actually submitted to us by they have a state coordinator for each state that helps implement all of the revisions required for the National Flood Insurance Program. The state coordinator reviewed our ordinance and made these revisions. I then subsequently sent them to our town attorney for our town attorney to review. And he has reviewed them and concurred that they are, there's nothing illegal about them. They are compliant with everything. And they are similar in nature to what every other town is seeing for ordinance and zoning revisions. So the consequences, if we do not implement the revisions for this, it can impact someone's ability to get a mortgage or to maintain a mortgage because it will impact their ability for flood insurance on the property. So that's the secondary consequences for not implementing. We are required to implement by September 7th of this year. So by holding the public hearing in August, you would also then be able to act on that same meeting in August in order to be able to meet that timeline for submission into the federal program.
I do have one question. With everything that's going on with the Eden Prairie Dam, does that have any impact on this at all?
Not really. I mean, they have that information, and Connecticut Deep has that information, but no, it doesn't really have any impact on this.
Thank you.
And it was recommended by the ordinance subcommittee to move forward.
Yes, so ordinance subcommittee did review this. Thank you for bringing that up. Ordinance subcommittee did review this and did recommend this for approval to the town council.
Thank you. Any other discussion, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on in the agenda. Next item up is council member reports and comments. Mr. Whitehead, would you like to start?
Yes, sir, I have nothing.
Thank you. And Mr. Grandelski?
Donna Brownwell made her presentation, and that covered it better than I could.
Thank you. And Ms. Murphy?
I attended agriculture and WPCA. Let's see, agriculture. Trying to remember. Amelia's foraging clash was pushed to a July date. Rick will coordinate with Amelia for a location. So they're basically talking about their classes. There was one thing that I thought was kind of, Byron Martin resigned and is no longer the OSLA representative. So Aaron Achenbach is going to be the new OSLA representative. Jonathan Blake came and he led a discussion on agricultural regulations and right to farm ordinances, and that's how I got a new rooster. Now I remember this meeting. Mr. Frizzles. All right, WPCA. They got their new blowers. They got a new grade 4 plant manager. Admin building HVAC. They're in the shop drawing process. The park pump station. What was this? Do you remember this, Ed, that the 2 weeks ago the pumps arrived? Is that what it is? But they weren't in yet?
Yeah,
Remember
they were
that?
just getting them there.
Yeah.
Prepped the site.
Um,
They were actually, I went by, they were working there today.
That's good, good. North River Lane and Maple Street, they were getting the specs to reline. Reynolds Street was about to go. They had 3 Ellis Tech interns working. I think maybe one of them left, but that's like a really nice program where the interns come and learn the business. They were talking about rate increases and discussing what other towns do around, and hadn't quite decided what they were going to do yet, but they were comparing with other towns. Hookups particularly, they think they need to go up. And that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wood?
All right, I'm making up for last month when I wasn't here. But it'll be short, don't worry. I did take a tour of the WPCA facility back in May. It was a great time with Joe. One of the things I will say is that man has a lot of passion and knowledge about this. And at the end of the tour, I did get my little emoji. I'm still very proud of that. I didn't get a rooster. I got an emoji. But Joe did a phenomenal job, and learned a lot about the facility and how they treat the water and things like that. The one thing I will say too is it kind of did upset me when I was talking with Joe and I asked him about the letter that we had agreed to try to endorse him to get that class 4, and the state still rejected him. A man that knows that much and has worked for that long doing that job and done a phenomenal job maintaining the plant. It's just it amazes me the state would still refuse him.
Yeah.
I also did a ride along, and I did this all while I was on vacation too, so this was a wonderful time. But I did a ride along with one of our Killingly constables. It was a good time with Officer Erickson. Learned a little bit. We really dealt with a lot of mental health issues here within the town. It was kind of hard for me to step back and just not say anything, to be the observer. But at the same point, it was great because I got to watch how he interacted with how him and one of our other constables interacted with the individual, and the partnership they have with United Services right now as well. That helps out a lot with really getting the services that these folks need. Our officers, as I was talking with Officer Erickson, pretty much if it is a call for the town of Killingly, they are taking it as long as they are there. The troopers only take it if both of them are out and about. So as obviously the numbers are showing, we're really, as we add more constables, we're taking on more responsibility, which is ultimately, I would think, the goal is that our officers handle 100% of the Killingly calls. The Historic District Commission, they had met as well. They had approved to get a bench, and the bench is going to have a little plaque on it in honor of Mary Keys. I'm probably going to mispronounce that. Keys, who was Keyes. Thank you. Who was the first woman to actually get a patent, and she lived here in the town of Killingly, and so it's in honor of her. We have some. Then they wish they had more money to get another bench because they wanted to honor Tiffany as well, considering, he was here in Killingly and went off to New York to create Tiffany & Co. So our Historic District Commission, I could tell you again, they do some amazing things as well. Personnel sub, we already discussed that, so I'll not belabor that any further.
Thank you. Mr. Cottula?
The Permanent Building Committee had another walkthrough of the KMS project. I wasn't able to sign the beam, but I got to see the beam up in place with all the signatures on it and whatnot. The building looks bigger now once the metal walls are up. It's not enclosed, but it looks pretty good size. They opened the bids and approved the bid for the Westfield Avenue envelope of the building, which came in under budget. So that's going to move forward, probably not till next summer, right, before they start on it?
So we're gonna start doing the helical ties. So they're doing a helical tie installation on the majority of the brick veneer, and that basically is securing the brick veneer to the main structure. The south side of the building, which has the most significant failure or separation of the brick veneer from the building, that component won't be done until likely next construction cycle because the brick veneer has to be fully removed. The windows also are going to come out with that because the windows are now sitting on the brick veneer and they're separated from the building. And that's gonna have to happen, and the roof will get done, the main structure of the roof will get done at the same time. So, those three pieces kind of have to all go at the same time. So there'll be a lot to get done in next construction cycle, but I was just there today for a demonstration on the helical tie. So we can see, how much noise it was gonna generate. So the occupants, because there are, during the summer, there's occupants still in the building. How are we gonna be able to manage that and for them to still be able to do their work? There's the administrative and financial staff of the Board of Education need to be able to get through and do their work, and not, go deaf in the process. So, we were there today to get through that. So we've gotten a good schedule ironed out for that. I think they'll be able to get the majority of the helical ties done this summer.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was at Personnel Subcommittee, which has already been going over. The regular Inland Wetlands Watercourse Committee meeting last week was canceled. They had a special meeting last night, but unfortunately I had another commitment, and by the time I got back into town, the meeting was already over.
We had the ordinance subcommittee. We talked about the flood regulations through FEMA. Board of Ed does not meet again until after the summer, and my NECOG notes are at home, so I will update that after, and you were there too, after the next NECOG meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Wakefield.
Parks and Rec didn't actually meet this month. They'll meet later this month. That's right, through the odds. But Red, White, and Blue went really well. I have to say I was pretty darn impressed with that grand finale. I haven't seen one like that in a really long time. That was an incredible finale. I know the next drumming circle is July the 22nd at the Broad Street location. That was a really cool part of the Red, White, and Blue from 4 to 6. It got quite loud there with the drumming, and I know it's really starting to take off. There's a lot of people interested in that. So I had economic development just before this meeting. The Economic Trust Fund, no real changes other than we accrued some interest. Got an update on Alexander Parkway. They're stumping the trees. They're hoping to get the car frames out in the fall. And they're looking to use town employees to do all that kind of stuff. They went over all the ribbon cuttings, Wicked Sinister, the CNA boot camp. What was really cool in June, the NECID, which is Commercial Investment Development or something related with real estate and development in the area. There were 35 people that showed up. They gave us an overview of what's going on in Killingly. They took a tour of 140 Main Street, and out of that 35 people, they ended up with 2 potential tenants, which is really good. There's a new tourism director at the state level. Apparently, he doesn't have any tourism background, but he does have a marketing background. And our own Jill is now the new vice chair for the tourism board. She said it's a 3-year term. Some of the grants that we have coming up, we were granted an EPA grant of $800,000 to do further work at the Blueville Mill, the Borough Treatment Plant, and any other phase 1s we may come across. The Bailey Hill site, the old Acme site, I guess there's some kind of litigation pending, but we had an intern from UConn that was actually helping to get all the paperwork together, so that hopefully we'll be able to at some point put a phase 1 in through the state brownfield funds. I guess there's something called Citizens Lab that will eventually come on board. We'll be able to access it through the town website, totally based on educating people in the process of brownfield study, how a brownfield study process and all the different steps that are involved in that. The Brickyard, we're still waiting on the state to approve our final contract, which, once they do that, we can go out for bid for design. The Small Business Academy, the next one is running September 12th through October 17th. It's on Tuesday nights. Since we started this, we've had 26 people go through, and 11 new businesses have started from that. And number 12, I guess, is going to be coming online shortly. And they are planning on putting in for an EPA forest management plan. And we'll know by September 30th. It's a $1 million grant from the EPA for forest management and wildfire containment. Anne Marie gave an update on some of the planning stuff. I guess the Big Y hearing has been postponed to August 21st. We talked a little bit about the floodplain, why it's so important for us to get the FEMA insurance plan put in place, because obviously it's already been discussed. And some of the other stuff they've been working on, zoning definitions, special hearings. There was quite a bit of discussion about the proposed Hartford Pike development. And I guess there's a family subdivision somewhere on Putnam Pike where it's one family owns it and they're building another house in back for another family member. So that's, and then of course, I guess they've been discussing revisions to the business park regs, so that's always so much fun. But that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Barclay.
Sorry.
The Housing Authority meeting was canceled, and Tammy addressed some of the planning and zoning. There was the workshop for definitions and text change. There will be the public hearing on the 17th. So the definitions are, would define like what a cannabis establishment is, what a daycare is. The public hearings were closed for the zone text changes and the definition of what a wedding event venue would be. Public hearing for zone text map change applications, update of the flood maps required for mortgages and insurance. The subdivision that Tammy referred to is 1.6 acres that they want to divide into 2 lots. And the zoning board was in support of the easement for Owen Bell and 580 Hartford Pike, and that's it. And the renewal of the gravel permit for Snake Meadow Club was approved by the commission.
And if I
Thank you.
can, just before you guys all completely wrap, I just want to let everyone know that I will be on vacation starting next Monday, the 17th, through the 25th. I will not be available. If you have any questions or need to reach out at all, reach out to Jen Hawkins, Finance Director. She has everything and can, get any information that you might need. So I'll be back on the 26th.
Be a good test for Ashley, all right? And we can get her email.
Nothing
address before you
nothing
leave.
like learning by fire.
Yeah.
All right, moving on in the agenda. Next item up is 17, executive session, and we have nothing for executive session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Wood, seconded by Mr. Grandelski. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.